You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey friends, today's guest is Blake Schwarzenbach, guitarist and vocalist for the punk rock band Jawbreaker. Blake and I break down the writing, recording, release, and legacy of the fan-favorite classic Boxcar, taken from their 1994 album, 24-Hour Revenge Therapy. The song Boxcar is one of the more simpler arrangements in the Jawbreaker catalog, but the story behind the song's inspiration is anything but ordinary. Blake shared how the song's roots can be traced back to the side of the road in France, while the band was on tour in the early 90s, what the song's title is in direct reference to, and how pickle juice played an ever so important part in bringing this song together. For all this and much more, lace up your Doc Martens and let's jump into this awesome episode.
Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast.
Man, I was trying to think of how I was going to set this one up. I'm not usually at a loss for words, but your band has meant a lot to me. My band, Less Than Jake, is from Gainesville, Florida, and you guys are just revered there. You always have been. As a matter of fact, that was the first time that I saw Jawbreaker was on Sunday, April 14th, 1996 at the Covered Dish. That was on the Dear You tour. I don't know if you guys played Gainesville before then. If you did, I was out on tour or something. Do you remember ever playing the Hardback?
Oh, yeah. No, we played Gainesville a lot. We always stopped in Gainesville.
I knew you did, and like I said, I for some reason had not seen you until the Dear You tour, and that's pretty crazy considering I knew that you had traveled through there before, and as I said, you were just absolutely like it was almost like you were a Gainesville band to all my friends that lived there at the time. So you guys released 4 records: Unfun in 1990, Bivouac in 1992. 24-Hour Revenge Therapy in 94, and of course Dear You in 95. And the track we're going to be talking about today is Boxcar, which comes from the 24-Hour Revenge Therapy record. So if you could take us back, was this song specifically written for that record, or was it written for Bivouac, or in between?
It's interesting that you chose that song because it's probably our least interesting song. And also the one that was like written in about 10 minutes. But it has been like a fan favorite, I guess.
Yes.
Kind of is a good introduction to the band because, you get it all in a very short amount of time. And I'll tell you, my only recollection of writing that song was when we were pulled over in France on a tour of Europe. And I think they were doing a drug check of the van. And we had to wait out on the side of the road. And I was out there like playing a dry electric guitar, just coming up with this kind of angry nursery rhyme song that had been like pinging around in my head, and that began it. And then I probably nursed it along in my mind and memory, and when I got back to Oakland, I think I kind of finished it off.
So was that on tour for the previous record Bivouac that happened, or?
Probably. I mean, we were always like one album ahead of our output in terms of like we would tour a record that wasn't released and bum out our fans every time. That was like, we were always playing the record about to be recorded.
Well, and back then you could get away with doing that because it didn't show up on YouTube right away and give away what your next record was.
Yeah, it's true. You have to be a little more cautious.
I did pick this song for a couple of reasons. There's some history between our bands that maybe you're unaware of, but we ended up recording a record with Rob Cavallo, and I was begging Rob in 2002 when we were doing the record because he had told me that you guys had re-recorded Boxcar for the Dear You sessions, and Rob's like, yeah, I'll get the cassette, I'll bring it in, I got it somewhere, and he never ended up, and it wasn't until YouTube that I ended up years later hearing that cut. But the song, even though you had mentioned it's simplistic in nature compared to some of your arrangements, which, as we know, just can get very jazzy and time signatures and crazy, and that's what I love about Jawbreaker. But this song still retains what I call your poetry. The words in this song are just some things, and that's why I'm so fascinated about it, and I'm so thrilled to talk to you today about it. It's it's still, I call it your poetry that you meshed with your music, that there's just stuff in here. I'm like, what does that mean? It's fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty off the cuff haiku kind of observational piece, and definitely a response to like what I felt was troublesome about California punk rock within that year. My experience of it, of kind of the scene, and how it seemed to fall short of the vision of punk that I kind of grew up with. Like, I felt like it was a really petty and kind of sniping scene at times. Looking back, it's fucking beautiful, honestly. Like, now it looks great. I welcome the backstab. No one cares anymore. But back then, it really did feel like people would get mired in these little squabbles that were like so outside of the kind of project of challenging received wisdom.
Right. And this podcast is we deal strictly, mostly with songwriting. And I don't want to get too much into this, but if there was one band that I feel that got unfairly treated by a scene that was supposed to be all-inclusive, was Jawbreaker. I mean, I hated it for you guys. I hated what happened to your band because I feel like there was so much more to your story when you guys had, called it quits. I felt that, and it wasn't just your band. I mean, the cries of sellout in the 90s were just, it was crazy. You couldn't do anything without somebody taking issue with it. Whereas nowadays, kids don't care what label you're on. They just don't.
It's true. Although I guess we have kind of there's so many ways to cast aspersion on people via Twitter or via social media. It's kind of the same tone emotionally,
mm-hmm.
But the issue isn't it isn't corporate sellout. It's more like you're a bad person or
right,
whatever.
Yeah.
But the kind of impulse seems to be the same, to like tear people. It's hating, just tearing people down to make yourself feel better.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that. It's a very interesting and valid point. That you're right. It's taken to the form of Twitter and Instagram and whatever else is the new hating mechanism versus opening up a zine and they signed to Geffen. Oh my God,
Yeah.
So you get back to Oakland and with this song that you wrote on the side of the road in France. And what did the guys think of it when you initially brought it to them? Because, like you said, it is a little simpler for Jawbreaker.
As I recall, I mean, that was a really hot writing period for us. Like, that album, for the most part, seemed to just fall together. Although we've been, kind of carrying those songs along for a couple years, songs like that one just happened. And like, Chris is such a great bass player, and Adam and I kind of have a real deep link, having gone to high school together. And we were just at that place as a band, which I'm sure and other band people know, is when you're on and people just like look at you or look at what you're doing and start playing. I think they wrote their parts almost simultaneously with me playing it. It was so direct. It was just like, all right, GCD. Chris was like on it. It was kind of I hate to use the term, but it was like a no-brainer. Like, you're going to go, build, stop, climactic, mini break. Like, it was all kind of like good songs. I think it was all almost built in to it. Like, the structure of it was just self-evident.
Yeah, and that is a running theme on my podcast of songs that were written so quickly that just seem to fall together just in a matter of seconds or minutes. Sometimes those end up being the best and fan favorites in this case of bands. So I think you mentioned before you were playing this song live then, prior to ever recording it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we were. I mean, it definitely became a song that people got psyched about. They knew, word got around the old way, via mail or phone calls or whatever, of like, oh, it's a song about like how you're not punk. And like that, I think that really appealed to people's sense of kind of how judgmental it could be, how, that feeling of isolation that you get at going to a new scene or club or show, whatever, that kind of painful self-awareness.
Right. And when you came back to Oakland, or I guess when you were on the side of the road in France, and you said you wrote the song. Did you write like the guitar chords and the melody, or was the bulk of the lyrics there, or had you come up with those later?
No, I think I just had the verse, the kind of the sing-songy part, so the chords and the melody.
Okay.
And probably the killing cops probably came about because of the French police rifling through our van.
That's awesome.
I was never a fan of law enforcement, so it could have been any cops, but
yeah, the French police, I've dealt with them before myself. They're not the kindest. So
no, it was very fierce at that time. Like that border in particular, I think they were really out to bust people for hash or marijuana.
Especially American bands coming through there, they're just a red flag. They must have something in their van.
Yeah.
Do you remember when producer Steve Albini first heard the track and what he thought of it?
Knowing Steve, I feel like that would not be his go-to track, nor in fairness would we be his go-to band. We were just, a band that he had time for and felt he could engineer adequately. But like, it's not an emotional connection that I love Steve Albini. I mean, I love the records that he's produced, and I really enjoyed working with him, but it was pretty daunting, us being fans and him being a kind of standoffish guy.
I've heard that about Steve, and for our listeners, Steve Albini's produced records from Nirvana, the Pixies, the Breeders, and many more. And I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not, that Steve's more of an engineer. He's not going to really tell you what's on his mind as maybe a producer would someone like Rob Cavallo. Would you agree with that assessment? It sounds like he's just kind of back here a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was very clear about that. That's his way of working with groups, is as a kind of a very accomplished technician, like just there to take a sonic snapshot of the band. Having said that, he's bringing all of his kind of power as someone who like really, knows frequencies and sounds, to take what he thinks is the best portrait of that band.
Where did you record the record at?
That was at his house. He had a studio with like a control room up in the attic and the tracking room in the basement. So it was before electrical audio, like before his new, studio now.
And he lived in Chicago, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to get into the song now. There's a 4-second guitar intro. It's just a 2/4. And then from the 5-second to 12-second mark of the song, there's like a volume swell. And I almost hear, Blake, and it's funny, I don't remember ever hearing this. And I've listened to this song hundreds of times. But when I went to analyze this and really get the headphones on and get into it, is there a piano or keyboard underneath there? Like almost staccato notes going?
There isn't. No.
There isn't.
Maybe just some overtones.
Do you know what I'm hearing though? Like right there, like between the 5-second and 12-second mark before the vocals start. I swear I'm hearing like a staccato piano going, or a keyboard of some nature, and would be very strange to think of Jawbreaker having that. But I guess you've cleared that up. It's not there. We're going to get into the first verse here, and I'll have you break it down. You're not punk, and I'm telling everyone, save your breath, I never was one. You don't know what I'm all about, like killing cops and reading Kerouac.
Right.
So I get you're not punk, and I'm telling everyone, save your breath, I never was one. You don't know what I'm all about, like killing cops. And, reading Jack Kerouac, I get that, but I guess you said the killing cops was referring back to possibly the whole thing that happened in France.
Yeah, I think it was just a kind of, I mean, as I said, it's a very offhand piece of writing. And it was like, hey, I'm about a lot more than just this little scene in the Bay Area, or, what your version of kind of punk rock or underground music is. Like, I happen to, have radical fantasies, and I like to read certain writers.
And what was that like at that time? I know that you guys were just adored in the Bay Area, but what were some of those things you were going through, from people talking? I mean, at that time it would have been in zines or just gossiping. There was no social media.
The Bay Area has always been a kind of contentious scene. I think there's a lot of shit talk in there, and I think it comes out of Berkeley primarily, like Berkeley being a kind of seat of radicalism and discourse in the 60s. And a lot of the kids there grew up in kind of former hippie or radical households, or I don't know. There's just a tone that like makes you want to punch somebody. Sometimes when you would be at Gilman Street and some person would start talking to you as though they had your number. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm going to quote Adam. Adam had the best take on it. He's like, there's guys in the East Bay that just seem like they've never been punched in their life. And I think people who've been there who aren't from there might understand what that's about, what that take.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's funny because I grew up buying mail order records from Lookout. And, you know, I had this fantasy as a young kid, as a young punk rocker, of what the Bay Area was like you guys, 15, Crimp Shrine, Green Day, Mr. T Experience, that whole scene. Like, I was immersed in it, absolutely loved every bit of it, was just enamored by the whole thing. And when I went there, you're right, it was intimidating the first time I went to the Bay Area. You knew you were an outsider, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard in retrospect to parse. Part of that is just being young. And there's like there's always kind of a cliquish way of young societies set themselves up. You know what I mean? Like it could
right.
be, that could be at the mall, like whatever. So there was that kind of, and like Gilman was home for the people that really were there all the time working and volunteering. And so they made it very clear, like, this is our house, your guest.
Right.
And yeah, like it was intimidating. You know, they couldn't be bothered really. They didn't care about your reputation. If you're from out of town, they're like, so what, you're hot shit in Gainesville. Doesn't mean shit here in Gilman, you know? When we got that, like, we were kind of from San Francisco, but also a little bit from LA. So there were a lot of people who were like, Jawbreaker, never heard of them, don't care. It took a while. I mean, eventually people began to embrace us, but it was like, at first it was just like, can't be bothered.
This is so crazy to hear because I, first started listening to your band 31 years ago now. And to hear that you were going through that, I mean, I just, as a kid, figured you're from that area and you're just gods there and everyone loves you. And that was my perception, you know.
No, I mean, we were very fortunate in that our first vinyl feature was on a World in Shreds comp, which was a Berkeley label with Crimp Shrine. And so we were kind of jumped in a little bit that way. And they liked us, you know. Aaron and Paul and Jeff really liked our band. So we got a foothold in that way. Also, like, Gilman's kind of a transient community. At that time, it felt like, you know, a lot of kids who left home would kind of show up there and start working and figuring their lives out. And then that whole group would kind of sometimes move on. So it was never like a fixed, there were some stalwart characters, but there were a lot of like young people flowing in and out of there.
Interesting. Well, we get into the what I'm calling the pre-chorus, and here it breaks down to 8-note guitars. I really, really like how the feel changes there. And the lyric is, my enemies are all too familiar. They're the ones who used to call me friend. And on friend, it opens back up to the guitars, the 2/4 there. And then I'm coloring outside your guidelines. I was passing out when you were passing out your rules. And it's really a cool chord climb that happens there.
I'm coloring outside your guideline. I was passing out when you were passing out your rules. 1, 2, 3, 4, who's punk? What's the score?
To set up for what is the chorus, but these lyrics here, let's break these down if you could.
I think it's more of the same. I mean, it's the kind of rigid punk guidelines of the community, and that they're enforcers who thought like would tell you what was proper behavior and what was improper. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a contradiction of that scene, I think, is that it was like, I think you were right in picking up on it being really fun, that there was genuine like horseplay and ridiculousness. And, you know, like, I think what drew outsiders to the Bay Area and Gilman was that from the outside, it appeared not to take itself too seriously. You know, with a band like 15 or Mr. T or something, like, it was a little goofy.
Yeah, it was. And at the same time, I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but, you know, a kid from Florida back in the day when all I had was MRR and Flipside and whatever my buddies got in the mail, the 7-inch that week to talk about. And this is before I even got to Gainesville. But my whole perception of the Bay Area was your bands were so much tougher than like East Coast hardcore bands. Like those are the bands that people thought were tough and mighty, but you guys just had a grit, a dirtiness to it that I didn't feel present in other scenes. I don't know. I just always felt that there was, even a band like Mr. T, who was goofy, there was still this somewhat of a grit to it to me.
Well, I always felt I was drawn to the Bay Area scene because it felt more punk rock than the East Coast that I had come from, which was very much like rooted in hardcore at that point. And I just reflexively didn't dig the kind of jock culture of New England hardcore. You know, I love some of those bands and I went to some great shows, but like that was not my world. And I was never going to make it in that world. And when I was introduced to punk rock, it was much more about like art damage, you know, like kind of fractured and also very creative. And I felt like the Bay Area was much more about that, like classic punk in the sense of like make your own clothes and, you know, have shitty amps and it should sound chaotic and kind of barely hanging together. A little more frayed.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying, that whole Haight-Ashbury, the Berkeley, that whole kind of, you know, you guys weren't hippies, but, you know, you were doing a lot of the same things that they were, making your own clothes, making up your own fashion, you know, speaking your own language.
Well, we were decidedly anti-hippie, though.
Right.
Because they were pretty bad, man. At that point in the Bay Area, it was pretty sad.
Hey there, I am Johnny Christ from Avenged Sevenfold, and I've got a podcast called Drinks with Johnny you're going to want to check out. I sit down with a bunch of different people from all different walks of life, from professional wrestlers to actors, comedians, fighters, musicians, everything in between. I'm just looking to make some friends and have a good time doing it. So if that sounds like something you're into, go check out Drinks with Johnny, streaming everywhere now.
Well, at the end of the first pre-chorus, the band is ringing out, and all of a sudden you just say 1, 2, 3. Or actually, on the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The band rings out. There's a dead stop, and you say, "Who's punk? What's the score?" And you know, again, such a simple lyric, but I've seen you guys play this live, and you know what happens during this part. Every fist in the air, and it's it's perfect. Did that just come to you? Was it always that lyric?
I don't remember, but yeah, it seems like something that would have happened just practicing or just kind of off the cuff, you know, the simplest solution.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but definitely people found something in that they related to.
It's interesting. The recording is very raw, but I mean, the drums are very powerful, and where the guitar hits are, and when you say what's the, and when the floor tom and the snare hit on that part, and the band comes back in, it's just heavy.
1, 2, 3, 4, who's punk? What's the score?
You know, and it's a full re-intro there, and then we get into verse 2, and verse 2 is funny to me because early on I knew what El Sab was, because Green Day had talked about El Sobrante, California before, and I always loved that lyric. And the lyric in the second verse is, "Got a friend, her name is Boxcar, cigarettes and beer in El Sab. Her hair was blue, now it's green. I like her mind, she hates the scene." So was Boxcar someone's punk name?
That was my girlfriend.
Really?
Yeah. And we had a kind of shared disdain for right thinking of the scene. And we drank a lot of beer together and drove around a lot together. Not at the same time, but, you know. Man,
I am sorry, I'm a little emotional. I'm like smiling ear to ear right now. A song I listened for 30 years. I never knew it was about your girlfriend. I thought a million things of what Boxcar could mean. And like a little kid in a candy store right now, man, Blake. I'm just like, this is great. So your girlfriend's name was Boxcar. So how did that kind of relate back to what the song is about? Just because she was there living this with you?
Yeah, she was very much. I met her through the punk scene, and I tried to impress her. I'll tell a little anecdote here. I'm pretty proud of this one. We went for Chris Bauermeister's birthday party up to the park in Golden Gate Park off Haight-Ashbury. We hiked out to this island and climbed up to the top of this little mountain in the middle of an island. We'd stolen a birthday cake from Safeway and a big jar of pickles. And Boxcar was present, and I liked her. I thought she was cool, and but I didn't know her that well. So I drank the whole jar of pickle juice to impress her.
And it did.
It worked. Later on, I found out it worked. Yeah, that was just planting the seed. You know, that was like my long game. And then I kind of asked back after it, like, did she notice the pickle juice thing? And I found out that indeed she did. So yeah, it was cool.
That I did not at all think that I would have heard you talk about pickle juice today. That's awesome. Do you still talk to Boxcar?
We are a little bit in touch. Yeah. She's out west, so we haven't seen each other in a long time, but we're friendly.
Okay. That's very cool. We get into pre-chorus 2, which is the same lyric, which I was almost going to call these verses, like a second part of each verse. But since the lyric is the same in each one, I'm calling it a pre-chorus. My enemies are all too familiar. They're the ones who used to call me friend. I'm coloring outside your guidelines. I was passing out when you were passing out your rules. Do you remember ever having another set of lyrics here, or having it changed up, or did you want it to be the same?
I think it was always going to be the same. I mean, okay. I used to try to never repeat myself, but this song kind of seems like a song where you do repeat yourself. I mean, it's so four on the floor, kind of straightforward that.
Then that's why I asked you. Interesting you say that, because you listen to other Jawbreaker tracks and not a lot of repeating going on. Again, I've always likened you more to a poet than a lyricist, which a lot, there's a bleed over there, but it's like poetry. And this song, I think, lends itself, because of the simplicity, to having this repeat.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of anthemic, and you want people to by then they can know it. They know, they don't have to remember that much to sing along. Like
right.
1, 2, 3, 4 is pretty, I think we can all retain that.
Well, we get into chorus 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Who's punk? What's the score? And it's funny, that only happens twice in this song, for such a huge part. And again, I don't know if you need to hear it more than that, because it is so simplistic. You hear it, and that's what it is. And after that happens, the intro guitar comes back in. It's just the guitar by itself.
Pray for who's punk, what's the score?
Again, I keep saying the word simple, but some of the best songs and catchiest songs are just that. Guitar by itself. And now we're into an outro. And the outro here is you're all alone, all alone, all alone on your own. All alone, all alone, all alone, you're on your own. And the song ends at 1 minute and 56 seconds.
All alone, on your own, all alone. All alone, you're on your own.
Don't think it needs anything more, right?
No, I think we may have had a little discussion about putting the chorus in again, because we thought it was catchy and liked it. And then we quickly quashed that. So we're like, leave them wanting more, get out of there. It was
right.
So rare that we had a short song. We really we needed more short songs. Fans would tell you that in Europe. They're like, what the fuck, dude? Los is los. This is 5 minutes. This is ridiculous.
Well, yeah, you guys did have, for a punk band, some definitely longer arrangements. It wasn't in the 2-minute mark. This was a shorter track. So again, going back to when you recorded it, and it was up against, because going back and listening to 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, this song kind of sticks out on its own. Was there ever a thought of this doesn't fit in with the record?
No, I think we knew that was a hit. We knew it was that was a big cornerstone of the record. We've got, when you build a record, your hopefully getting songs along the way until you feel confident enough, like at around 8 or 9 songs, you're like, maybe we can start looking at studio time. Like we've got enough, we're over the hump. Okay. And I think that was a pillar of what we had. We're like, this is a solid bet. So
cool.
Definitely it was always, it was going to be featured on the record.
And now the record comes out. And I know you had played the song prior to the record, but you said you think you did, but record finally comes out and now you're going and playing songs from the album. Do you remember this one getting a better reaction than other tracks, or was it pretty crazy out of the gate fan reaction wise?
Yeah, it was pretty instant. I mean, because we're a little more of an obtuse band. Like you have to dig, and to a newcomer, it might be like, I don't know what this is, but that one was very much like, here you go. And I think it was instant. People just like, they remembered it immediately. It was a little pop song, so they could just get a hold of it.
Did that reaction surprise you, or did you guys kind of know that was what it was going to be?
I know that it delighted us, and like we would have to hold it, be like, all right, we need a winner at around track 8 or 9 in a set list. After, whatever it would be, they're going to be
5-minute obtuse song.
Yeah, they're going to be like, people are going to be drifting away towards the bar. So like we have to pull them back in. So that was kind of our eighth in the hole, like when in doubt, Boxcar.
Right. Well, that is so cool though, because I've had songs that I've written, and I want to see if you can relate to this, that you're for sure that the fans are going to love it. And even the recording of the song's good. It came out, the tempo's right, the vocals sitting right, and you go play it live and it just sits there like a dead fish in the water. And you might try it the next night and finally you just drop it from the set list. You're like, it's not working live. And then there's some times where you're convinced the song's going to work live and it does. And it sounds like that's what Boxcar was. Like, you know what? This is a little pop gem. It's going to work.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely had those other songs, but we're pretty obstinate. Like if we liked a song and thought it was strong, we would just keep playing it until people either accepted or left.
Yeah, that's a good attitude to have.
Kind of like the whole Dear You record was a little bit like we put that out and it just sat there like a dead fish.
Which is crazy to think because, it's kind of what I call revisionist history. There's people now, it's like, oh, I love that record. It's like, well, you didn't love it then. Because, I mean, I know fans of Jawbreaker that Dear You back then was not their favorite record, but now is their favorite record. It's funny how time has a way of changing your perceptions.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to friends who do creative work a lot about this. Like, I think we as artists kind of have unfair expectations in a way that if you look at art through history, it's very rare that someone's art is appreciated in their lifetime. I mean, music's a little more quick, but nonetheless, like deep creative work, you're lucky if anyone's paying attention. And so I try to keep that perspective of like, sometimes you just got to keep on the road and like, ultimately you're doing it for yourself. And
yeah,
if you're waiting around for people to tell you to keep going, like that, you're gonna run out of air.
For sure. Well, you mentioned at the top of the show, that you were surprised that I picked this song, and it was, for me, it was more about the story, and I wrestle with this with the show. Like, do I go for like the fan hit, or do I go for the song? Like, I would have loved to have broken down "Save Your Generation." The key changes in that song are just mind-boggling. That's the Jawbreaker that I know and love, and I love Boxcar equally, but they're completely different worlds. I did notice when I was researching the song that on the 24-Hour Revenge Therapy 20th Anniversary Edition, there's an alternate version on there. It almost sounds like a demo. Is that what that was?
I don't know, actually. Adam would know that because he's kind of our archivist and has all the tapes.
It's funny. It almost sounds like the same take, but it sounds like you're playing through like a really bad tube amp or something. Like, it's just the guitars sound different on that particular take. And I do want to touch on the Dear You sessions. And Rob had told me, and I don't know if this is true, Rob Cavallo, I had asked, well, why was it left off of Dear You? And he said it just didn't seem like it fit in on the record. Was that the case?
Yeah, I thought it felt a little desperate to me. Like the label really wanted, they felt it was a strong single and introduction to the band, but it seemed kind of cheap to us to like include what was already on our last record and our base would know that, So, they could go buy the third record.
Well, and it's funny because Dear You sounds so much different than 24 Hour Revenge Therapy. Production-wise, everything. Rob's just a different producer. Sonically, Dear You, it sounds way cleaner. I absolutely love it. But it's funny, the re-recording of Boxcar doesn't sound that much different to me. It's damn near the same tones and everything.
I know, it's true. Hey, that also was another reason. It's like we haven't changed it. We haven't improved on it at all. So why add it? Like, even if the guitars are technically wider, it doesn't beat the original. The original is like got all the spirit.
Yeah, it's funny you say it doesn't beat the original. It's almost so samey as the original that why include it again? Why not just include the original, tack it onto the record?
Yeah, it felt like a cover in a way.
As everyone knows, you guys took a long hiatus, and I believe it was 2017. Was that the Riot Fest show when you guys came back?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're looking down the set list. Boxcar's next, and you go into it. What did that feel like? Because I know the place exploded. I've seen the videos. Yeah,
well, we did that first. And it was, again, kind of like the song, like a no-brainer. We argued a bit like, well, we could be like challenging and put something really hardcore up front for the fans. But then it just seemed like, you know what, this isn't like rocket science. It's people who want to see the band after a long time. And like, let's just start with, this is going to be fun. So it was a bit of a gesture of goodwill. And like, also, we just knew technically it's not one you have to think about that much, except for me, like hitting my toggle switch to get to from quiet to loud, which I probably almost missed. But it was, it's like it's a muscle memory song. So you're just like, we made a rule, like we're going to be so fucking terrified for the first 15 minutes of that set that let's keep it on shit we're really confident about.
Autopilot.
Yeah. Adam had suggested actually Save Your Generation. He thought that would be the killer opener. And I agree, like the logic was sound. It's like, that's a good way into a set because it's kind of walking the plank, just the singer and the guitar. But to me, that was a nightmare. It's like, I suck at downstrokes, first of all. So it's going to be my like clubby, I do like up and down, even if it's supposed to sound like.
In front of 60,000 people at Riot Fest.
Yeah. I was just like, there's so much room for catastrophe here. Let's just go with like the balls out, track. So it was a great opener. And definitely people, I was looking down I didn't look up till 15 minutes into that set.
Yeah.
I was just staring at into my own mind, like keeping myself level and just keeping space so I could let lyrics come forward and all that.
Before we wrap up here, in all those intervening years in between the breakup, of course, you formed Jets to Brazil. You guys had what I consider really, really great success. Many bands would give their eye teeth to have the success you had. But in the back of your mind, did you know that the legend of Jawbreaker was growing? Did you know that eventually you were going to be on stage again, or did you want to let the beast lie?
I really didn't think we would be back together. And I felt the legend grow because that was the first thing that hit Jets to Brazil in the face, was like, all the people that didn't seem interested in Dear You were there screaming at Jets to Brazil to be more like late period Jawbreaker in the beginning of that band. So it was really tough on my bandmates because they were like, what the fuck, dude? Like, don't they know we're in a different band?
Yeah.
But it was just still a little bit of that going on. So, but I could see definitely like the legacy. Jawbreaker was a lot more popular after the split than during.
I've told people that that I saw the band, younger fans of my band that I'd see on the road, and we'd get to talking about punk music and stuff, and they never had a chance. They were too young to see you guys, and it was just, you saw Jawbreaker. I mean, people literally freaking out. And I know you had to have felt that, what I'm calling the legend grow, and then finally it just culminates with you guys at Riot Fest, and that had to give you, I don't know, some kind of closure, so to speak, on what had happened to the band. Because again, I feel you guys were unfairly treated by the press, by the fans, for going to a major. It was just uncalled for, in my opinion.
It did feel like a certain vindication. Mostly because it was so joyous,
Good.
But Riot Fest was the right place for us to do it. Just like the whole culture of that festival is so in tune with where we come from, and they're so about music and about having a really good time,
Yeah.
So like they took great care of us. Yeah. And I think we all felt a little bit resolved.
Good.
Certainly like I love the feeling of walking off that stage after we just thrashed it. And like the relief was palpable between all three of us, like so much history and damage and joy too, but like a lot of sadness, it wasn't fixed, but it was like, it was seen.
and I'm going to tell you something from the punk community. And I think so many years had passed, all those sellout and all that crap and everything that happened, that, time does a certain way of healing things. Nobody in the punk community, nobody that I knew, everyone was stoked you guys were coming back. It was like arms in the air. This is a victory. Everyone's happy. This is not a bad thing. There was no shit talking. It's like, fuck yeah, Jawbreaker's playing Riot Fest. We were stoked, and just congratulations on having that resolve. You guys deserve it. You're absolute legends, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
What's up, everybody? I am Finn McKenty, host of the Punk Rock NBA podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. My podcast is all about doing what you love for a living, and every week I sit down and talk to people who have done exactly that. For example, musicians like Tommy from Between the Buried and Me, Matt from Periphery, Lil Lotus and Shinigami, among many others, photographers, artists, designers, YouTubers like Glenn Fricker and Sarah Dici, and I unpack exactly how they got to where they are today with the goal of helping you do the same. So if that sounds cool, you can listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com, and I'll see you there.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a podcast, all you have to do is submit your song and bio to bandyoumightknotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Compilations. It is a project started by Terry Irwin from Austin, Texas. Terry gets together with some friends and they create these songs and look for guest vocalists to sing on the songs. This particular track we're about to play features Ken Conti from the band The Implants on lead vocals. You can stream their songs on Apple Music and Spotify. And here's a snippet of their song, With Time.
I seek out with no disguises.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
All right, man. Well, from the bottom of my heart, I think that was one of the best episodes. But I'm going to preface that by saying I feel like, to use some 90s terminology, I feel like a real poser, because for as big of a punk rock fan as I was and as I am, I kind of missed Jawbreaker. And I don't really know why I missed them, but you, on the other hand, if people, I know everyone's just listening to the podcast and can't see you, but you had a smile from ear to ear that entire conversation, and I could just tell how huge of a Jawbreaker fan that you are. So, talk about that for a second.
Well, like I said, it was almost like they were a Gainesville band. They were just like gods. They were legends in Gainesville. And I was more of a Jawbreaker fan now than I was back then, believe it or not. Like, they were, Blake even mentioned, some of their stuff was kind of obtuse and out there, and I was more of an immediate, more of a pop punk fan, and that's why I love Boxcar so much. It was just a little more digestible than some of their other stuff. But as the years have passed, like I said, like a song like Save Your Generation from Dear You, just the key changes throughout that song are they're bizarre. I'm like, how can you write a song like that? These guys were so ahead of their time, and as I mentioned in the episode, just unfairly treated. I mean, you can tell that that the band went through hell, and I'm so glad, and I'm glad I brought it up, and I'm glad that Blake feels that they had some resolve. That's the word he used. That made me feel good as a fan, and that's why I was smiling ear to ear, because I just felt during the episode too, I learned so much, right. And just the fact he opened up about drinking pickle juice,
Yeah, that was cool. Hey, he said something I thought was pretty profound. He was talking about like that punk scene stuff, the punk scene ethics of the 90s and Berkeley in general. And what he said was, looking back on it, it's beautiful. And that was a pretty cool thing to hear, because at the time, being immersed in it, it had to be the most obnoxious, annoying thing in the world to have to deal with that. But looking back, the fact that people cared that much about that sort of thing, it is kind of beautiful. I know that when I was researching this episode to send you some notes, I was reading things like, I got all mad about reading about Ben Weasel giving him such a hard time, like in articles and things like that. And, I was a Screeching Weasel fan, but I'm like reading this being like, man, fuck Ben Weasel. But looking back, like, there's almost something complimentary about the fact that someone cared enough, because you could very easily be indifferent to whatever bands do. And I feel kind of like that. People are indifferent about that sort of thing for the most part, from what I see and experience. It's people do care a lot more just about, what's the song sound like? How's it make me feel? Which on one hand is a cool thing, but on the other hand, like, maybe you do miss a little bit of people caring so much about that stuff.
Well, I think when he said beautiful, I think he was referring to a simpler time too, Chris, because he had said right after that it's just kind of been replaced now by social media, the hatred, and those petty jealousies of life, and those cliques, and those cliques start young, they start in preschool, kindergarten, I hang out with these kids, and that's what was going on in the punk scene then. And I think he meant beautiful because it was a simpler time. There is more, even though it was tumultuous and crazy back then, what they were going through and what some bands were going through, just for doing what they wanted to do as a band. I think it's definitely more evil. There's more hatred now with how accessible any one of these keyboard warriors can be online.
I thought it was really interesting when he was talking about the Bay Area scene in general. I never really thought about the fact that Berkeley, he called it it was a seat of radicalism in the 60s. I mean, that's where the hippies were, the anti-war movement. When I watch things, movies, documentaries or whatever, I always look at that area as being like, that's my people. That's where I would have been. But it's funny to think about, okay, that's the 60s, 70s in that area. Now those people have kids and they have this sort of outlook on things. And that's where this punk scene develops in the 90s that you and I are very familiar with. And, you kind of have this attitude, that Blake referred to as a tone that makes you want to punch someone. I thought that was really funny. And he said there's a lot of guys in the East Bay that seem like they've never been punched and things like that. That made me kind of understand that attitude. And you brought up, and I feel the same, like the first time you play that area, the first time you play in Berkeley or San Francisco, it's a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, it was grimy. It was, some of the areas, a lot of the punk clubs back then were, always in seedy areas, but there was just something gritty about it. I don't know. There was something, I felt there was a little more danger there than there was in New York City or New Jersey or even Detroit or Chicago. There was just something about the Bay Area. And a lot of it was what I had built up in my head, that I would sit there at night and as a high school kid and just, read the liner notes to the Mr. T Experience record or Green Day or Screeching Weasel, and just be like, have these fantasies of what it would be like to live there, and what it's like. And so it was, I remember the first time going out there, it was just so cool. It's like, this is where all these bands, this is their stomping grounds. This is amazing.
Switching over a little bit to music talk a little bit. One thing that was mentioned in this episode that I don't think's been mentioned in any episode yet, but is very interesting to me, is that Blake mentioned overtones. You thought you heard something. You thought you heard some keys or something in the beginning of the song?
I'm convinced there's a damn piano doing a staccato, like ding, 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 ding piano part.
Isn't that crazy, man? For anyone who's listening, overtones are something about the frequency in the song that fools your ears and your brain into thinking you're hearing something that's not there. And I've had lots of examples of this over time. I'm hearing, a lot of times it is what you're saying. It's a piano, it's a synth, it's something, but it's actually just something you're hearing in the recording or something you're hearing like in feedback or that's fooling your brain.
Yeah, and my brain was telling me that there's no way in 1994 Jawbreaker put a piano on their damn record. My mind was telling me that, but my ears were telling me something else. And
Right.
It's right at the 12-second mark at the top. There's a volume swell, and then the band comes in, and I swear I hear this piano keyboard something like buried back there that's kind of chugging it along, but Blake set me straight. There is not.
I'm sure there's more of a scientific explanation to it than what I can offer, and I'm sure someone, like Howard Benson or Mark McCluskey or somebody could talk to why exactly you hear that. I understand the concept. I don't understand the science behind it. But
yeah, they tell me I've been at a punk rock band for 30 years. My ears are shot.
yeah, that could be it. Another thing you guys touched on in this episode is the legend of Steve Albini. I play in a band called Pack, and one of my bandmates, Scott, plays in a band called Zayo, who has recorded with Steve Albini before. So I've heard some first-hand accounts of Steve Albini, and you guys touched on it. For anyone who doesn't know, anyone who plays in a rock band knows Steve Albini. He's famous for producing everyone from Nirvana to the Pixies to the Breeders, Superchunk, Cheap Trick, Helmet, Joanna Newsom. The list goes on and on and on. And one of those things when it comes to punk rock ethics is that Steve Albini famously never takes publishing on something he does, which is wild because, that could have resulted in millions and millions of dollars from Nirvana alone, But I think that just like Blake had touched on, I think that maybe Steve Albini considers himself more of just an engineer, of someone who captures something and not so much of a producer, but you and I wouldn't necessarily agree with it. The guy is a producer.
Well, yeah, he's credited as producer, but as Blake said, he's just there to take a snapshot of what that band does. Oh, that's what your amp sounds like. Cool, I'm going to put a microphone in front of it and make it sound like that through the speakers. That's kind of his thought process of recording, and I can respect that. And I can respect what you said of him saying, you know what, I'm not taking credit, monetary credit for this composition. That was you. I was just here to capture that.
Which is really funny because in researching this episode, I saw that on this album, I believe it's this album, that the producer is credited as Steve Albini's cat. is who is credited as the producer.
Yeah, the cat's name is Fluss, Fluss.
Yeah. So that's really, really funny. Oh, Chris, you know what? Speaking of Fluss, I heard he had some relatives up in Everett, Washington.
Fluss certainly does have relatives in Everett, Washington, Chris, and that would be this month's fundraiser, Kitty Corner Cat Rescue and Lounge, located in Everett, Washington. Since their start in 2016, they have saved over 2,000 cats from high-kill shelters and cared for them until they found their forever homes. Kitty Corner is more than a shelter. It's also a place where you can go and hang out with kittens in a comfy lounge-style setting. Owner Christina Robinson, volunteer and fundraising coordinator Bonnie Sands, and the whole Kitty crew are incredibly grateful for this opportunity to raise funds to keep saving kitty lives. So please, if you can, head over to ChrisDeMakesADifference.com. That'll link you to their site, and you could help us out with some kittens. Donate some money, please.
I love spending time with cats and kittens in a comfortable setting.
Well,
it's one of my favorite things to do.
Why would you want to spend time with a cat in an uncomfortable setting, right?
Absolutely not. But I do often spend uncomfortable times with my own cats, but that's a whole different story. If you can, head to ChrisDeMakesADifference.com and pitch in $1, pitch in $2, pitch in 10, whatever you can to help out the great people at Kitty Corner Cat Rescue and Lounge. That's like a tongue twister, but go check it out at ChrisDeMakesADifference.com. DeMakesAwards.com.
Yeah, I want to thank each and every one of you every month who donates to our fundraisers. It feels really good to give back, and we could not do it without you. Thank you so much. If you haven't checked out the new Less Than Jake YouTube page, it is revamped with a bunch of cool stuff. So head over and check it out, and please hit that subscribe button. And I host a songwriting podcast that you're listening to. And because it's a songwriting podcast, that I guess you could kind of assume, Chris, that I'm into songwriting. So I want to write somebody, that means you, a custom song. Hit me up at chrisdemakes@gmail.com. I could write a song for your wife, for your husband, for your friend, for a coworker, anniversaries, birthdays, special occasions, whatever. Hit me up and I'll send you some info.
I'm still waiting for my song, although I kind of got my song, Chris, because you and I have a related podcast that we release an episode of each week now to our supporting cast program, and the theme song is finally kind of my song.
It is. The After Party theme song was written for you, in honor of you, for sure. Please check out ChrisDeMakes.com. That'll direct you to Supporting Cast, which is our VIP program. You'll get bonus episodes and all kinds of other great stuff in the near future we'll be releasing.
It's really awesome how many of you have signed up. We're really excited about that. It allows us to continue making this podcast that you've grown to love. Just like I say in the ads. You'll hear ads every week on here for our episode of the After Party that week, which is our bonus episode each week. And ChrisDeMakes.com, if you can help us out, that will be really, really awesome. And for those of you that have, thank you. And I hope you enjoy all the bonus content. There will be surprises along the way, too, we promise.
And as usual, thanks to each and every one of you for your support. And I want to thank this week's guest, Mr. Blake Schwarzenbach from Jawbreaker, for being on the show. He was awesome, and we'll see you next week.
Each week on the One Hit Thunder podcast, we welcome a special guest to come take a deep dive into a one-hit wonder artist with us. And together, we decide if that artist brought the one-hit thunder or was nothing more than a one-hit blunder. You can find One Hit Thunder anywhere that you listen to podcasts, so hit that subscribe button and join in on the fun each week.